Hey guys, how are you doing?
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
We're back again. Welcome everyone to our latest LinkedIn Live. We're so excited to be joining you today for this, and thanks for tuning in. For those of you who don't know Harnum, we are the global leaders in data and analytics recruitment, and we are so excited to be launching our 2021 salary guide. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat along the way. We're happy to answer any and all questions regarding the salary guide or our thoughts and perspectives and what we're seeing in the industry. And if you can download the link to the US guide, it's available for you. Our European and United Kingdom guides have already been released, so you can find those videos on our website. So first off, to do some quick introductions, my name is Michaela Pappas-Weber. I manage our San Francisco office for Harnum and our recruiting operations on the West Coast. Sam, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Michaela. Good afternoon, all from New York. My name's Sam. I'm a senior VP and partner here at Harnum. I've been with the business for about 8.5 years, been recruiting in data and analytics recruitment for about the last 11. Most of my time in London, but I've spent the previous 2 years in New York. And I run the day-to-day operations of our New York office. And I'll pass over to Steph for her introduction.
Great, thanks, Sam. My name is Stephanie Brooks, Senior Vice President. I've been with Harnum since 2016 and have been in recruitment for about 10 years now. I'm heading up our Phoenix, Arizona office and I'm excited to be here with you all today.
Cool. Well, I'll introduce the guide and give you an overview. So this salary guide is a result of a global survey of thousands of data and analytics professionals, and it offers an in-depth insight into the job market as it stands. So when you get a chance to download the guide, you'll find an overview of average salaries, the analysis of the latest hiring, workplace and technology trends, as well as expert commentary on how we continue to drive progress in the world of data and analytics. And so the data itself has been completed by 4,606 respondents globally. So thank you to everyone who completed the guide. We've also analysed all the placements made by the Harnum US team. We've analysed all the data from vacancies logged throughout the entire year. And we've also done extensive analysis of data and analytics roles advertised online. So as you can imagine, a lot of data there. And then we've broken down the salaries for each role by experience level. So when you look in the guide, there's a number of different levels which we've asked respondents to match themselves to. So we've got entry level, which is someone starting out their career, maybe just had their first promotion. We've got mid-level, which is someone who is experienced in a hands-on position, remaining in a technical capacity. We've got principal level, which is someone a little bit higher, still hands-on, probably not managing. But then when we get to the more senior level, someone who's a technical lead or director, that's someone who's moved away from the technical role, is in a management position and looking after a team. And then we've got salary details for VP level and above, which is obviously in a leadership capacity. And so we've taken all of that data and we've analysed it in collaboration with our diversity partners, Into Science. If you don't know them, they're a really great organisation who are helping promote diversity within STEM subjects. So that is a little bit about the guide. I will pass over to Steph now, who's going to introduce our first topic, which is one of the big talking points of the last 12 months. Steph.
Great, thank you, Sam. As Sam mentioned, a big topic for this guide this year is around analyzing, obviously, with the workplace in COVID-19. So last year's guide, when we did this launch, really offered insight into the 6 weeks before and after the social distancing was enforced. And obviously, this was a big change and something that a lot of businesses had to adapt to that had never experienced before. So this year, it does give us a better overview into the longer term impacts of the pandemic. So I think generally overall, there are positive thoughts, on people's employers in the sense that, 79% of people thought that they were prepped for remote working, and 70% thought the changes were well communicated to them. So it sounds like leaderships across different businesses and organizations kind of band together and had to come up with their own working plans to adapt to what was happening on a global scale. Another interesting statistic is that 71% saw that their hours were impacted, and nearly 1 in 4, so about 24%, did take a pay cut during the pandemic. And so about 70% of those have actually gone back to normal. So we did see a lot of businesses having to do layoffs and furloughing and pay cuts just to obviously prepare for what it was that our entire economy was facing. And now we're absolutely seeing more of a sense of normalcy and that bounce back. And so forward looking, people do want to work remotely. We're seeing on average about 3.5 days per week. And it's interesting. A lot of individuals across a number of different industries are actually really seeking out, that human interaction and office time. So while it's been a big adjustment, and a lot of people, you either love or hate working from home, there's definitely a transition period that we're all facing now and moving forward. To look at what the new norm, if we can even find one, what that will look like moving forward, and how many different scenarios and scales, each company will have to take their own path. And so at this point, another thing that we've seen is that only 20% had agreed a future work from home plan with their manager. So, be interesting to kind of hear, Sam and Michaela, what you've seen in both San Francisco and New York, just relating, the different kind of companies and businesses that we've been working with.
Yeah, I can give you my thoughts first. I mean, it's been an interesting year, to be honest with you. Obviously, everyone working from home, and then what seems like quite a slow transition back into the office for most companies. I think really there's kind of a mix of opinions and approaches out there. I think it's fair to say everyone's been quite cautious in announcing policies, announcing whether they're going to accept fully remote or if they're going to be back in office. I would say it's been quite a mixture. I know for a lot of our clients on the East Coast, there is a lot of work from home opportunity. Whether that's fully remote in the long term, I think is yet to be seen. I think, like I say, a lot of caution out there. But yeah, I think the clients that are hiring fully remote are getting access to more candidates. But also on the flip side, the clients that are saying you're going to have to be back in the office are saying to people at some point, and there is going to be an element of flexibility. And with the people moving, right now, a lot of clients are saying, kind of Q2 2022 and keeping it quite open-ended as to when they actually have to be in the office. So yeah, it's been an interesting mix. And, I think there's, things differing from company to company, industry to industry. But yeah, Michaela, I'm not sure what your thoughts are from the West Coast as well.
Yeah, a little bit similar. I think we are seeing a couple of clients who are now starting to stipulate or making plans to mandate being back in the office over the next month or two. And it is interesting, you brought up a good point, what that does to their talent pool, because I think a lot of candidates, have gotten used to a certain way of life. They've been able to prioritize family and getting things done and not having to commute. And I think that that's going to be a hard balance to strike, because yes, I think there's a lot of value that people get from being in the office, communication, learning, knowledge sharing. But I think that there is going to have to be a balance, and to any company that's looking at how they can make the most over the next 6 months transition, I think having that flexibility piece is going to be so important. And I think we're at this crazy confluence where we saw businesses, a lot of our clients didn't hire the headcount that they needed to hire in 2020. Now they've almost got 2x growth plans, the 2020 growth plans and their 21 growth plans that they're stacking up, intersecting with a market where candidates are burnt out, and they're now thinking it's, candidates that would have left their role in 2020 but felt unstable to do so are now looking at opportunities. So we have this confluence of 2x demand for talent and candidates actively seeking new opportunities due to burnout and other stipulations. And that's even causing a bigger demand in the market and fewer candidates. So for any employers right now, you really have to be in a dogfight for talent. You have to see it as have to woo these candidates to you and present your opportunity and why they should be accepting your opportunity over the 10 other opportunities they're considering. So I think that it's just a very volatile time in the market, and staying close to these candidates and presenting a solid, flexible opportunity with them in mind is the best way to make sure that they are growing their teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say that I think one of the interesting points, which I think you were probably about to come on to, when Steph said 79% were companies were prepped to work from home. But I think we rarely hear about when people are moving now, the reason is for, due to, COVID policies or work from home. I think a lot of people are offering the flexibility, which is a good thing. But in the guide, I think one of the interesting statistics was one of the top reasons for leaving is working from home. So, companies are kind of doing it and offering it, but people are leaving because they want to make sure that, they're working from home, amongst other things. So I think, Michaela, you were going to come on to some of the points around why people are leaving.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we do that, we do have a question from Kunal around what type of questions did you expect from the initial round of interviews for a data role? My perspective on first round interviews is it's usually more of a behavioral based questions for testing you out based on your experience and if you'd be a good culture fit and if your motivations align with what the role is offering. So I think if you're looking at a first round interview, you really want to be able to talk about your experience in a storytelling sense. What about your career progression has put you in the perfect position to be now considered for this current role, why you'd be a good fit for their culture, and maybe you're asking questions about their culture to make sure it aligns with your goals. And then logistics makes sense when you're willing to start, what your comp expectations are. That is usually the first round interview. But the biggest thing for a first round interview, in my perspective, is making sure you have a story as to why this is now the right move for you and having good questions to ask to that team. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was going to just add to that. I think a lot of times with us, as Michaela mentioned at the beginning, the introduction, we're a global leader in data and analytics recruitment. So our bread and butter specialization, all that we do is staffing, hiring, with our clients and companies into positions such as data scientists, machine learning engineers, marketing analytics, and so on. And when we partner with these companies that we work with and our clients across a number of different industries, when our candidates are going into that first round interview, a lot of the, quote, first screen that you would typically have is actually done between the recruiter that you're working with and providing that information to a company. And so, as what Michaela said, our clients typically want to see and hear, what is that personal tie or that drive? Why are you passionate about their mission and their vision? Because we know that if we've got you in that, your foot in the door in that driver's seat for that first interview, you are going to, 9 times out of 10, you are, technically fit for that role. You've gotten to that stage already. So, we are seeing that kind of first stage interview almost acting as a second or third in some cases when partnering with a business like ours and making sure that you have that kind of real personal tie to really set you apart to why, you are interested in coming into that company and what you can do. To be part of the bigger picture for whatever that organization's your goal or mission is.
Well, so to move on to the next section, which is probably the most interesting to people, why are people leaving? So for the third year in a row, we're seeing career progression be the number one driver for why people are leaving. So I think that the takeaway for that is making sure managers are outlining career progressions for each of their employees and staff, and having really open conversations with them around what those goals are and how they can achieve them. But another interesting stat is 69% would leave for the right opportunity. That's actually a really big drop from what we saw last year, which was 80%. So it looks like people are a little bit more hesitant to take risks and take those job moves right now. Kind of makes sense. With all of the volatility in the markets and the world with the pandemic, I think people have really hunkered down and wanted to stay with, the devil you know versus the devil you don't know, and see what opportunities they can make the most of in their current business. However, the flip side of that is 81% of surveyed individuals feel more secure this time than last year, where they were in their role. So I think that's a high number of people that feel very safe in their current role and don't want to be that kind of last in, first out thought process around joining a new business. So I guess kind of tying into what we've been talking about, what do you guys think businesses can do to increase their retention from your experience that you've seen with your clients and candidates?
Yeah, I think that there's a number of things. It's certainly been a challenging environment for businesses to hire, as you say, less people looking for roles. And actually what we're experiencing right now is there's more roles, so competition's up. I think from my perspective and what I often tell hiring managers and my clients, a really tight, fast process, which engages people well, is key. We've obviously transitioned to the world of video conferencing. I think a lot of people forget that when you're not in person, you don't get that office tour, you don't get the kind of the softer relationship building. So I know a lot of my clients have been thinking about how do they engage candidates more? How do they ensure that actually in these video calls, you're having kind of softer conversations as well as just testing people's technical skills. And then another thing that I think is really important, technical tests within our industry are pretty common, as are kind of long processes and presentations and things like that. I think with the the work from home fatigue and lots of video calls, then to spend your evening doing a 3 to 4 hour technical test can put a lot of candidates off. So my advice to hiring managers, like I say, is just to try and keep the process fast. Obviously, test these people as you can and do technical conversations, but try and avoid things that take up lots of time in people's evenings, because the reality is they'll have 4 or 5 more options that probably don't need a technical test, and they'll look elsewhere. So that's what I'm seeing from my side.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think, as you mentioned, we all live on Zoom and we're trying to step away from that. And, for companies, for example, that would normally have a panel interview, 5 to 6 hiring managers, a full day in office, you get to sit down for lunch and get to know your candidate personally. Over Zoom, that's really tough to do. So, my advice would be to have your hiring managers double up on interviews, have really efficient, tight timelines. And if you're going to have 5 to 6 people on a panel, try not to have it over 5 to 6 different sessions, because that can feel quite long and quite draining. It could be done in one go, for example. And we've seen a number of different creative ways that our clients have gone through interview processes and made it fun and tried to do more of a kind of behavioral cultural tie and assessment into it, as opposed to just that kind of long drawn out technical piece that Sam spoke about. And again, as people are, coming back into the workplace and traveling again, and, companies allow, and depending on the situation, in-person meetings, they've started up again. We've had a few hiring managers of ours meet with potential candidates over coffee and kind of starting to get to know what it is to be back in person again. I think that will be a slow transition, but I think there will always be that aspect of that kind of remote Zoom interviewing and just trying to be really mindful of the candidate's time, especially as it's a very candidate and actually job-driven market. We're seeing candidates who were not on the market and not looking, and by the time they get through a third interview, somehow have 4 to 5 other offers. And that's kind of just what the nature and I guess the norm is of the market. So just being mindful of that and the timeliness of getting through an interview process with somebody that you think is a strong possible hire for your team.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a situation last week where we had a couple of offers for a candidate, and they accepted the first offer presented just because that company moved the quickest and saw the most value in them as a candidate. So I think that carries through to the entire full end of the process. Just because you finalized the candidate doesn't mean you can wait 2 to 3 weeks to put out an offer. We have a question from Miguel on remote working. During the hiring process, do people take into account the time zone in which the candidate is located? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely a thing that we're seeing. I mean, a lot of not just with interviewing, but Sam mentioned the remote working earlier, and the kind of quality of candidate. Now, a lot of people moved out of major expensive cities. We've seen quote the mass exodus out of places like San Francisco and LA and Boston and New York, and a lot of individuals over the last year and a half have moved to a lower cost of living, and so that could come with another time zone. And I think it's definitely something that our clients and our hiring managers are trying to be mindful of. I think when it comes to looking at an opportunity, if you're going to be working for a West Coast based team based on the East Coast, there's going to need to be some flex and give there. And I think that's something that a lot of our accounts that we work with are kind of navigating that, as we speak. I mean, I haven't really seen anything too crazy as like a middle of the night or super early morning interview per se, but just being mindful that if you want to be remote and have those perks that working for a team in another area, there's going to be just some flexibility on both ends that are going to be required.
Is there anything that anybody's seen with, for instance, like families now looking at hybrid models? I think that's one interesting piece that's probably going to crop up for companies. A lot of families have been dealing with kids running around while they're on Zoom meetings day in and day out. A lot of women having left the industry, which I think came through in our salary guide. Has anybody talked to any of their clients or any candidates about experiences that they're now thinking about kind of looking at a hybrid work model?
Yeah, I've seen it a little bit where we are seeing, our typical companies that are saying, traditionally would be a very much, no work from home, must be in an office. And now, obviously, as we're discussing our new norm and what it will look like, again, going back to that maybe, 3-day work week or what it might be. I mean, there's some situations where as travel's picking back up, we've seen some of our accounts say, okay, if we're going to get, an amazing, individual in another time zone, then they would be required to travel maybe 1 week a quarter or whatever that might be. But I do think that hybrid model is coming up a little bit more. I think a lot of companies are just trying to figure out how to navigate that and how to best fairly roll that out within their business without having an entire organization move into that model, for example. So I think it might be based on even driven down by team within organization.
Yeah. And I think I agree. I've seen a lot of actually big businesses, without naming names, being kind of surprising with their flexible policies. I think following the pandemic, expectations of work from home have certainly gone up. And actually, if you turn around and say you can work from home once a week or just 2 or 3 days a month, for a lot of people, that's not enough. I think where we're seeing the most success in these hybrid models are kind of the 3-2 splits. Either way, I think most candidates, if they are in and around the area, or for example, New York City, if you're living close by, going into the office 2 or 3 days a week, I think is pretty acceptable for a lot of people, and it seems to be working for a lot of businesses. So, yeah, if it's not fully work from home, I think the hybrid model seems to be the way to go forward. Although, like I say, interesting, a lot of the big corporates are saying no. You have to get approval from your manager to work from home at all. So we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating to see this rigidity kind of coming so quickly back in. For me, I think the caution that I would provide to candidates and clients alike is we went through that like transition in March 2020 into that new normal. And then we all got used to that new normal. And now we're in this new transition of another new normal. And I think that the biggest message that I have to everyone is there's just so much change and people are burnt out. and the more patience and flexibility from an emotional intelligence perspective that a manager can have with their staff is going to impact their retention more than anything. And then from a candidate's perspective, everybody's getting a bit of itchy feet, a lot of questions. There's a lot of change going on in the market. And I think that makes people think that they need a personal change. And that might not be it. It might not be the best time to make a life-changing decision at another huge transitional phase of the world. So I think everybody just kind of staying calm, thinking, being patient, that can kind of help. And that's kind of what we're talking to clients and candidates about as well. As long as you have the right motivators, i.e. no career progression, maybe your salary is misaligned, maybe you don't have the flexibility that you need to support your family, like make sure you're focusing on those key drivers as to what prompted your job search initially, because otherwise we see candidates get to offer stage and just then get cold feet to make the jump, which is the worst thing that you can do to a potential employer, to your recruitment partner, and so on and so forth. Just a quick reminder to anybody listening in, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we're happy to answer them. There is no wrong question and we're happy to share our insight. Steph, going to pass it over to you to talk a little bit more about the gender diversity segment of our guide.
Yeah, and I think what we were kind of just talking about does transition nicely into this really big and important topic around gender diversity. Each year we do actually create a full diversity report. So we're going to have a lot more detail on that, another live session around our actual diversity report and our findings in September. So we'll briefly touch on this subject now because I'm mindful we do have another exciting discussion to go through in just a few months around this. So we've seen really mixed signs this past year. I mean, gender diversity across the board, across every industry. I'd say at least multiple times a week, I'm having really consultative conversations with the companies that we're partnering with on how to help organizations better diversify, their staff and their team, but also how to attract and how to bring in more gender diversity into a panel and an interview team, for example. And so, kind of talking through some of the statistics, it's been really interesting to see from the data that we've collected. So, generally throughout the industry, and other than life sciences, interestingly enough, gender diversity has generally dropped. Now, it's such a big and important topic, and a lot of companies are actively trying to drive this forward. But it's actually, life science went up 37% from 31%. Overall, though, the total gender diversity is just at 27%. So quite similar to last year, haven't really pushed the needle forward too much. But looking at it, the sector of the different verticals that we cover that we found is the digital analytics space is actually the highest. So it's at 39%, but that is a decrease. So from last year, our digital analytics gender diversity was actually at 41%. So it's still the top of the polls, but it's still a bit lower than what we've seen previously. Computer vision is actually at the lowest. So similar to last year, only 13%. And I think just thinking about how and why that's happened, I think, as I mentioned, companies across the board, we're actively partnering with driving gender diversity across teams, but it all starts with the interview process and how many females we can put through who could be qualified for a position, and just really analyzing why it's dropped over the last year. I do think that COVID-19 and the pandemic has had a direct impact on that. We've seen a lot of female talent have to step out of work and focus on childcare, and there's been situations where we're really looking at how to help females re-enter the workplace now. They've been out of work over the last 18 months or so, and so we've really seen a lot of clients try to really achieve better parity at this point, and what we're doing is just bringing forward the best top tier talent that we can, helping guide them through their interview process, and doing everything we can to get new females hired into teams, for example. And I think the other bit of this is talking about that retention piece that we spoke about. Thinking about a really up and coming and bright, let's say, female engineer who is at a principal level and has a new and young family. It's going to be a necessity to be able to offer that flexibility and offer that kind of hybrid work model to be able to accommodate, to the more of the personal side and so on, as an example. So I don't know what you've seen in your companies or across the East or West Coast, or are you kind of surprised to see that the rates have dropped, or kind of what you've heard about this, I guess, from your areas?
Yeah, I think it was obviously makes for interesting reading, and I'm looking forward to reading the diversity report that comes out in a few months. But I think from my perspective, it's obviously, clients are still very keen. I think the conversations that we have, all of us three, on a weekly basis with clients is very focused on this, but it's clearly quite a slow journey. Like you say, the number of females hasn't gone up year over year for the reasons that you said. I think hiring is more frantic than ever at this point, as of right now. So people are just trying to hire whoever they can. But I think that the positive signs are, like I mentioned at the start, we're working with Into Science, who are a company who encourage diversity in STEM subjects. Obviously, that is going to take quite a lot of time to filter through to the market. The kind of roles that we talk about and hire generally are a kind of mid to senior level. So there's not going to be an instant impact. But yeah, the continuous conversations with clients keep happening. We certainly take this topic very seriously, and we're doing what we can. But it's slow progress, I would say, from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think that's why that flexibility piece that we keep talking about is so key. Steph, you're right. We did see such a large number of women exit the workforce and are struggling to get back in because they do not see a path to how they could do what they were doing before and still maintain their family units. So I think that if you are looking to attract strong female talent, women talent, then you really need to make sure that you have that flexible hybrid model to support their priorities that have shifted over the past year. I think also my biggest point with anything when you're looking at increasing diversity in a business, like Sam, like you just mentioned, everybody's frantic right now. They're looking for Band-Aid fixes to increase and grow their businesses. But really, if you want to increase your diversity, that's something where you need a strategy. And instead of just moving diverse talent from one company to another, the key is growing the talent pools. So if you're a business that is preaching that you want to have a diverse business and you want to improve diversity for like the global welfare, then what organizations are you partnering with at an early age, whether it's Girls Who Code, Black Girls Who Code, whatever that is, to make sure that you're growing those talent pools so that you can then reap the benefit of that in the future. And that's the forward thinking. That's actually improving diversity. Moving a strong woman engineer from one company to another isn't growing the number of women engineers. It's just, a Band-Aid fix. So that's the other thing that I would encourage businesses to think about over the next couple of years.
Yeah. And that, ties in nicely too. I think for those of you who aren't familiar, Women in Data is a great organization. And it's one that, at Harnum, we are partnering quite closely with. And, it is an organization that, is purely there to, as Michaela just mentioned, help be a guide to women in data to either get to higher positions. So, the number of women on a board seat, for example, is few and far between. And so this type of organization is one where you can kind of come together with other like-minded individuals and kind of talk strategy and that sort of thing. And then on the other end of it, it's for women who have the work experience or the education and are trying to get into the workforce or back into the workforce. And so it's something that our team at Harnum across a global scale are really partnering with this group to kind of play our part and do what we can. And it's such a great thing to be involved with. So Yeah, I think for any of you that are listening, if you have advice or you'd like to kind of pick our brain around how to better kind of hire and develop women in your own teams, and on the flip side of that, those that are looking for new opportunities, we'd be more than happy to set up a meeting and chat through that with you.
Great, cool. And so I guess moving on to our next topic, which is that of salaries. Obviously, it's a salary guide, so we need to talk about salaries and what that has looked like during the global pandemic. So the good news for data and analytics salaries in general is they have kept moving up. To be honest with you, as have candidates' expectations, even with the uncertainty that the last year brought. The candidates' expectations of a pay rise remained at 20%. So that's what people were looking for. And when we surveyed all of our candidates of the pay increase that they actually achieved, those that moved, that standard at 15%. So to break that down into the different sections that we recruit in, the biggest salary increase achieved was in life science analytics at 17% on average. That was closely followed by data science at 16%. Our advanced analytics team saw an average increase of 14%. Data and technology was 11%. Digital analytics was 10%, and computer vision was 8%. As I think Michaela mentioned earlier in the conversation, 24% of people did take sort of COVID pay cut. Whether that's linked to overall bonuses, we're not sure. But of those 24%, 70% are back to their normal levels, which includes bonus and things like that. So I think our message has been, it's been quite a turbulent time in terms of salaries, but those that are moving and are kind of taking the risk and changing jobs are achieving a good increase, it would seem. So I guess I'll come to Michaela, interested to hear your thoughts on what you've been seeing in the market on salaries, what clients are saying, what the kind of the attitude of candidate is as of right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been, again, pretty turbulent. We're seeing salaries jump from where they were. An engineer who maybe was earning 180K in 2020 is now being offered 210 in 2021. So I think, again, if you are a business that does not have expendable budgets like some of these high-tech, high-performing businesses, that's where I think your sell needs to be more around these other elements that you can offer a candidate. But also it might be important to look at what you're flexible with in talent. If you can get a really good junior engineer who's highly committed to your business and smart and switched on and can develop and grow, you probably need to be looking at that candidate and be willing to be flexible if you cannot boost your salaries the way some of the businesses are doing currently. We're just seeing some of the highest offers ever be sent out. And I think, again, that's just due to this confluence in the market right now of the growth rates and the stall of growth in 2020 and the candidate market just moving around really, really fast right now.
Yeah. And I think, certain people's priorities have shifted or have changed over the last year or so. And I think for companies to, like Michaela said, don't have that expendable budget, need to get creative and think of other ways to incentivize employees, whether it be, a company shutdown, time off to recharge, and extra maybe PTO or certain health benefits. And so there's certain things that you can do if you can't make it on the that bottom line of the base salary. Overall, what does that look like, and how can you be competitive in the marketplace? Because time and time again, we are seeing offer beat out by offer after offer after offer, and it has become so competitive of a market. It's changing rapidly. I mean, I think every quarter we're seeing increases.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I think we mentioned those big tech companies or publicly listed companies who are the ones offering packages with RSUs or stock and equity, which actually, if you look at some of the big tech companies, their base salaries are actually quite low, but they offer a big incentive on stock. And there does seem to be a bit of a void between those kind of companies and then your kind of smaller or medium-sized company who are offering base salaries and bonus and things like that, but can't compete on stock. Is creating an interesting dynamic in the market. And also, if you look at the tech companies who have performed well, their stock's gone up, 4x in the last couple of years. Expectations of those candidates already in there have gone up. So what are you seeing between, candidates moving between those kind of companies, but also outside of those businesses, and how that's affecting the market?
So we've typically seen if a candidate is used to if they are incentivized by the equity, by the possible IPO, by the stock, what that could look like, then it's an attractive thing to offer. When you see candidates who are so used to just their cash compensation, and that's all that is important to them, it can be a little bit of a different conversation. And I think it is just around, companies educating possible hires to explain, if they've not been used to this type of a pay structure, what that could look like and why. So it's really just down, I think each individual candidate will have different kind of push and pull factors and drivers. And, some of the kind of, I think most competitive offers I've seen have been that kind of, the median, maybe 85% salary range, but they also provide, the great perks and benefits, but then they also have an equity package. So you either see it swing really high on one end, a really high base and low extras, or possibly a really low base and high bonus package. And those ones that are in that middle ground kind of can cater to both types of candidates. So it's really been just a case by case basis.
Cool. So I think Michaela, I think you're going to talk about the next topic, which is technology and where we've seen the demand there.
Yeah, and to tie into that, we just got an interesting question from Caitlin. Caitlin says, I've been noticing a lot more hybrid roles between MarTech and data and analytics. Is this a trend you've noticed? If so, how does that impact the salary range you should be looking for? It's an interesting question. We actually have had a bunch of our ad agency clients who are looking for that traditional analyst, but that could do almost some more of that back end pipelining work from a data engineering perspective. I think, Caitlin, the two things you want to think about are, yes, that is a more technical role. So yes, that does justify looking for maybe a 5-7% increase on your base salary. However, I think traditionally that ad agency background, their budgets are traditionally a bit lower compared to high tech. And that's not to say anything wrong about that industry. It's just something that you need to consider if you're negotiating, that you're not pricing yourself out of an opportunity. Now, if it is a traditional technology company based on marketing technologies, then that might give you more of a leg up. But there is definitely a role that we're seeing in that area. So the more you can hone your skills on some more of those technical elements and on the closer to the back end side, you'll set yourself up for more success to earn that higher wage. But from a technology standpoint, interestingly, the top technologies that we're seeing, and it's so funny because these technologies change so quickly year over year, but some of the ones that have stood the test of time are those SQL skills and Tableau and AWS. I think that those are the highest technologies that we're seeing consistently year over year. Obviously, Python still remains the number one coding language that is in demand, that we see day in and day out. And that is one of the top 5 skills that came through in the salary guide. The other newer technologies that we are starting to see come through, TensorFlow is in huge demand, especially when we're looking at that AI, more deep learning element of our business. And then Proper is a newer technology that seems to be in that top 5 technology space. So if you're a candidate that is looking to be highly marketable in this market, Python, SQL, TensorFlow, Proper, and AWS are those technologies that you want to make sure that you're using. but using on a commercial perspective. So I guess a question for both of you is, how are your clients feeling about somebody that might be using these technologies on a project, or a nonprofit or a personal project, or maybe even in an academic setting versus commercial setting?
I think having these tools under your belt, because like you said, these technologies are changing rapidly. And so I think a lot of our clients, see that if there is a certain kind of, if you have a passion project or certain, maybe in academia, and that you've worked in some of these technologies, and they're willing to come in and help kind of train and bring you up to speed internal from an industry perspective, we have seen that flexibility there. I think it really kind of just depends on the specific position that that team is going to be looking for, and really understanding what the technical requirement is. I would say that these tools that you just discussed, these technologies are they're so rapid across the market with our candidate pool, that if you are in the space and you don't have an expertise or just a solid understanding, then definitely take that on your own time. Let's say if you are in an organization and you're not using Python, I would go on your own and try to enroll in maybe a program or certificate and try to get ahead of that, because again, as Mikhail mentioned, these are moving and changing on a rapid basis. But it's really important to know that these are the main technologies that a lot of different companies across industry are looking for.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think from a data science perspective, definitely seeing Python as being one of the main drivers. And within data science and analytics in general, as we move forward, it's important to note that there's even more specialized roles. We're certainly, for example, seeing a big demand for strong NLP practitioners who have got experience in BERT and transformers, but also adding in engineering capabilities as well. If you look at machine learning teams, a lot of them are now end-to-end. They own their own pipeline, so they don't need the support of a data engineering function. They are doing it themselves. So a real mix of skill sets, to be honest with you. And from an entry level perspective, and clients in general, what I'd add to that is people, like Steph said, people have got a genuine interest, and at interview can display that they're really into this, whether it's they've been to an industry event, they've done something in their spare time. Even if you are a Python driven data scientist, you're exploring new tools and technologies. A lot of our clients like that, given the roles are kind of research driven, they want people who've got a genuine interest. So we've placed some great candidates who might not have hit the mark, but have shown really good kind of interest and research in these areas, and they've ended up getting the job and getting a really good salary. So that's what I would add to that. And we've got a good question from Maggie here, as we're coming up to the end of the time, so it might be quite a good one to kind of close on. So Maggie asked, what are you seeing in terms of demand and open roles compared to the supply of talent? How does it vary from entry to experience to management? So Steph, I don't know if you want to take that one and give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when you think about just the demand in the position, there are so many different companies that are hiring right now for so many different types of talent. So across the board, we are seeing new build outs of teams. If it's a new project, for example, or within an acquisition, a lot of times there's going to be, the internal hiring, but then there's also going to be that external hiring, and it's going to always be evolving. So, whether it's top down or bottom up, organizations are constantly trying to grow and, again, diversify their teams and bring in creativity and diversity. And that comes from individuals who have experience in the space or who don't, and who come from another area. So I think the job demand is really high. Mikhail mentioned this earlier. A lot of companies put their recs on ice in the last year and a half, and now we have that headcount back open with additional new headcount that's being approved. And so we're seeing a huge influx of need in the market, and the candidate pool across the board is needed on all levels and all spectrums. So for those of you that are looking for a job and are struggling, for example, to make a connection to a company that you see that's really interesting or you're passionate about, or even in a sense where you see a company and there might not be a live job posted that matches your background, bring that to us, bring that to Harnum, because that's, what we do is being able to reach out and provide opportunities to those that we partner with that others might not know about otherwise. So regardless of the level, I would say, we'd be happy to help as long as obviously it's within this realm and sector of the data and analytics space.
I think like what I used to tell and educate our clients in 2019 was that for every one candidate on the market, there were 36 available jobs. And I don't think it would be too bold to say that that's probably doubled in 2021. So yes, I think that the demand is across the board, whether you're entry level or experienced and at the management level. So it is all about just, it is a numbers game. You have to make sure that you're connecting with enough people, enough companies, and presenting yourself in the right way to identify and find that opportunity.
Yeah, I would say, and just from the East Coast side, as mentioned, we are the busiest we've probably ever been. My phone's gone off during this live presentation with a client asking for another 10 open vacancies, which won't be advertised anywhere. So, we're really busy. The market, if you're kind of thinking right now, should I move? Should I look? I would say now is an excellent time to be looking in the market and getting in touch with someone at Harnum. So, but yeah, to answer Maggie's question, it's huge demand as of right now.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And again, thank you to everybody who have tuned in today and have joined our session around our latest and greatest salary guide. We really appreciate those that have participated and the questions that you've asked. And for those that, we haven't been able to get to your questions, please feel free to reach out to Sam, Michaela, myself on LinkedIn or through our website at Harnum. And you again, just to reiterate, you can download the guide, the US, the UK, or the EU guide. All editions are available, and we have had live discussions as well that are posted that you can take a look at. And please, again, feel free to get in touch if you have any questions. If you're looking to make a key hire, if you know that you're going to be hiring in 6 months' time and you want to start planning now and strategizing because of the competitive nature of the market, please give us a call. We're happy to do whatever we can and just be here to help as a partner in the industry. So thanks again, everyone. And Sam, Michaela, appreciate your insights as well.
Thank you. Great chatting.